Ryan, what's up, dude?
Hey.
We're back.
This is awesome. Kessel Chat round 2 for me. I'm like super excited, ready to talk.
Excellent. I got some of the music cleaned up in the beginning. I got the overlays cleaned up a little bit. My wife had the suggestion to remove the full border overlay that I had last time. She's like, it just boxes you guys in a little too much. I'm like, great. We'll just do the lower one. This works perfect. Minimalistic. And now like we can see each other's offices a lot better. Because all the stuff that's in your background and my background, like this is the fun part about this. Like we do this for a reason.
I'm not gonna lie. The stuff that's usually on that side of the camera gets to come on this side of the camera.
Exactly.
So I'm
awesome.
actually really excited. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Every week I'm gonna try to add another piece of memorabilia that I have.
Well, see, now you're gonna make me start having to mix up all this stuff too. I'll have to pull all these books down and start putting all my comics up there next time.
No, man, it's funny because it's like, and we were talking about this a little bit. It's easy. It's actually kind of hard now to pick like, oh wow, what am I going to pull out? What new thing am I going to put up on my wall back here? And in fact, this is one of my favorites. Oh, right on that side, that Millennium Falcon picture. Now that it seems like we're finally kind of coming out of those COVID days, I'm actually super excited because I was able to pick that up at one of the last comic book conventions that I was able to go to. So I can't wait to get back out. There's a lot of local artists that are usually producing a lot of cool stuff. So I'm pumped to be able to show these things off, but also get more things. So, yeah,
absolutely. Well, everybody, welcome to the Kessel Chat. Thank you for joining us. I've already got a couple folks on. If you're watching, put some comments in the chat. Say hi. We'd love to see you here while we talk. Because Ryan and I can we're going to go off in the weeds. So if you want to be part of the conversation, you're going to have to just interject. It's just going to have to be that way. But Ryan, dude, thank you for coming back. And speaking of local artists or people who make stuff, hold on. think I've shown these on the show once before, but I picked them up. I think I picked both of them up from 2 different Etsy stores. So I've got my Sith holocron, both fully 3D printed. I think the battery's dead on this one. Yeah, I ran the battery too long. I need to change that. And then my Jedi holocron. This one, the battery is still active though, so you can kind of see the nice little glow. I forget which one it was. I think it's the Sith one that I picked. It's a father and son. I think his son is like preteen, maybe younger. Wow. And the whole story on their Etsy shop was like, I think they had this product and like one other, but they like either made up the plan or found it. And they said the father got like his son involved in like, hey, let's do something together. So they started doing 3D printing. And this was like the first product they came up with, and they started selling it. I'm like, I am totally buying it just because of that. But they had like green and purple and yellow and all these different colors. I'm like, but then this one, the title of this one's color was Darth Maul. I'm like, okay, I'm totally buying that. You're not gonna be able to stop me from buying this now.
Oh no, it's funny because it's like I'm always having to like hold myself back. This is like it's like I love all of the Etsy stuff that you can go and find. Like I actually picked up this shirt. It's like a combination of 2 things that I love, which is Star Wars and camping. But what's funny too is that there's like all of these things that you can go out and find, or like all of these cool artists. I always like when it's like a small, like the artist that you're talking about, where it's like a father and a son, or it's just someone that's doing their own kind of crafts. I love that kind of stuff. I will say that I feel like I've been running things down for years. I remember when I was in high school, and when episode 1 came out, there was this crazy like Taco Bell giveaway where you could go to Taco Bell and they were giving out this and that, and they like gave out like a magic 8-ball Yoda. But the thing that you could get if you got all of the tickets, it was like their version of Monopoly, the McDonald's Monopoly, is Han Solo in carbonite. And you could put it up on your wall. And I remember thinking, if I just had, if I could get enough of the, chicken soft tacos, I would probably get Han Solo. And of course, I'm sure that the Monopoly, it's just like McDonald's Monopoly. Who knows where that Han Solo and carbonite is?
Yeah.
But it's funny how you can find pretty much anything now. If you're looking for a lightsaber, if you're looking for a T-shirt like this, or even like
right,
all over.
Especially on the lightsaber side. By the way, we have someone watching I think this is either my wife watching. I'm pretty sure it's my 5-year-old watching. So Ryson, hi. Thanks for watching, dude. Lightsabers I was looking up the other day because I realized I am sans lightsaber. It's like one of the few things that would be glorious to have like stretched on the wall or vertical on the wall right here. I'm like, I need a lightsaber. So I started looking for them. I'm like, there's kind of the cheap plastic ones or kid toy ones you get at Target. I'm like, I want a good one. And the price difference is pretty substantial. I'm like, okay. Well, maybe I have to think about this for a little bit because the really nice ones are really nice and really pricey. I'm like, I'm totally going to spend the money on it. Totally going to do that, but I just need to make sure it's the right one first.
Oh yeah, no, and it's funny because so I've been to Galaxy's Edge. Have you made it down to Galaxy's Edge?
We have not.
Okay.
And you know what the crappy part is too is my parents live in Lakewood, which is like a 15-minute drive from Disneyland. We just haven't had it.
Okay. So I've got a couple of really cool Galaxy's Edge things, but I got to start with the lightsabers. The lightsaber experience there. My wife and I, and at the time it was like a whole family trip. Our daughters were going with their cousins to Disneyland. My wife and I showed up there with 2-year-old twins. Ooh. We were just gonna.
Dude,
we were just gonna like. Well, we were gonna be because we were just going through LA, and so we were like, we're just gonna like hang out there. Like it was really nice weather, and the boys have always been like super chill, and the Galaxy had the Galaxy's Edge had just opened. And so, we couldn't go and sign up for the lightsabers, but the people that were coming out of that, I was like looking at some of the things that they did. And one guy, like I was talking to him afterwards because we were just sitting in there, like in the kind of Galaxy's Edge area looking at this. There was like an R2-D2 that was there that was like blowing my mind because R2 is seriously my favorite character in Star Wars. And so this guy tells me, he says, you got to go through it. It's an experience. I don't want to tell you, but something really cool happens as you're building your lightsaber. I have not done this yet. And it's like, I'm like hanging on the edge to find out. And there's you can go and watch them, and someone's like filmed it all the way through, and they'll even tell you like, "Hey, spoiler! Like, there's a cool thing that happens when you go and build a lightsaber." And so now my interest is at like fever peak.
Oh man.
And,
okay.
Yeah. So now I'm like, I'm sitting here like now COVID is like I said, starting to close where it looks like we're going to be able to go out there again. And so like you, I'm like, I'm willing to take this journey because I've heard it is crazy cool. And there seems to be I don't know what it is, but now I'm like, oh man, like what is this going to be?
I am. My wife and I were talking about this just the other day. We're like, we've just been waiting for like my family to get vaccinated and like that stuff's all happening. My wife's getting her vaccination. Like this stuff is just kind of rolling now. And we're like, okay, maybe in a few months, closer to May time period, we're planning to do some camping with my family. That'll be cool up in this area in NorCal. Okay, maybe we'll go back down to LA. I'm like, but now you tell me this. And I've heard a hint of this before, but I keep forgetting to look it up. But now I know this. I'm like, I'm not going to look it up because I don't want to know. I don't want to spoil the surprise. But I'm like, well, crap, now I want to go. I'm like, yeah, my 5-year-old, you can come with me if you want to. But I'm like, this is really going to be a daddy thing. I'm just saying, dude, I love you to death, but this is really going to be for me. Just putting it there.
Oh, no. I mean, it's like, man, I can't say it enough. Like anybody that's watching this right now that's thinking, oh, hey, I haven't done this yet. Is it really that good? It's really that good. And it seems like, especially if you watch this on the last time, that I'm just a very big fanatic of Star Wars. Just because it has the Star Wars label on it doesn't mean I'm crazy about it. In fact, I was actually really worried that it was going to be really commercialized, that I wouldn't like it. And from the entrance point, like, because you kind of like pass through this little gateway to go in there, to the experience overall, I absolutely loved it. Like I could say things like, oh, the blue milk was great and everything else, but it was like the holistic experience, every single part of it. My kids loved it. Awesome, and we were just like passing through. So
yeah, that's freaking cool, dude. I'm officially excited. I'm going to text my wife in a bit and say, this is on the list of things we're going to go do. All right.
Oh yeah.
Let's jump into some topics because we got a lot of stuff to cover tonight, and you added some cool stuff to the agenda. And the first thing I wanted to bring up, because I had mentioned it earlier, or the day or two ago, I've been trying to get my son to kind of rewatch or watch some animated stuff with me, because he's occasionally into it. And so then he asked me a question about Darth Maul. I had a picture up of like a comic of Darth Maul or something. He wanted to know. I'm like, well, let me pull up. It's, I think it was season 2, the last 2 episodes of Twilight of the Apprentice at the end of Rebels. It's awesome. Darth Maul is there. Ahsoka is there. It's just, it's glorious. And so I pulled up, and it's a 2-part episodes, like 20 minutes each. And so I have him watch like the first episode with me, and he actually was pretty intrigued. Like, 5, so he's asking me a lot of questions, but he's asking questions, and he's still got his eyeballs on the screen. I'm like, all right, super excited. So I was like on a total high. I'm like, this is gonna be great, dude. We'll go back to this. Go to pull it up today. I'm like, want to watch it? And he goes, no, Daddy, I'm good. And I start pulling. He goes, no, Dad, I'm good. Thank you. I don't. I'm just gonna go do this thing over here. I'm like, damn it, dang it. I was so close. I mean, I'll try again later, but I was just like, you know what? What I'm hoping for with him is that, not that he's going to get like huge into Star Wars right this minute, but that he at least will sit and watch it for a while. But that's the challenge with him, is he gets distracted and he wants to do the next thing and sitting there watching one show, unless it's like a serious kids cartoon, like, Octonauts or whatever. He doesn't get his attention doesn't get like wholly hooked on it. But I'm kind of hoping with something like Rebels, because it's easy to watch. You don't have to really see the story necessarily overarching to get through all of it. But the great part is it is one long story that just progresses through all the seasons. Even unlike, as much as I love Dave Filoni's Clone Wars, and that the Clone Wars is the overarching story, Anakin's fall is kind of a through line in the whole thing. With Rebels, it's very different because literally from the start of the series to the end of the series, there is one story really that's being told. There's these offshoot pieces that happen to kind of do character arcs and build them up, but at the end of the day, it is their own rebel cell who is operating independently, and then by the end of it, the rebellion is a real thing, and then it kind of ends. So the way that it ends is really the rebellion is become a much bigger thing, and it kind of leads up to A New Hope and what is going to be A New Hope. So it's like, it really does have this nice through story in the entire time. And I'm hoping with him that I can get him to like be interested in that. And like, that would be a really good series, because it's funny, but it's not overly campy like some other series I've seen out there. It's not quite like that. So I don't know, kind of hoping. We'll see.
I have not been watching Star Wars Rebels. Like, okay. I've caught a couple of episodes online. And I've actually, and this is like, I don't know if it's like my kids watch my kids do this. I will watch clips of things on YouTube and I will get sucked in. And I am like, I am ready to, it's like with everything. It's like, I know I'm going to get into it. It's like, I'm going to go the whole way. And I'm like, oh man, like I really like a lot of what that story is.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels kind of like, and I'd love to hear kind of how your journey through that series has gone. It feels like, and I don't know if you watched, and I know it was really popular over the summer, Avatar: The Last Airbender, where the first season is very much aimed at like a younger audience, and then it gets much more serious.
Oh, does it? Oh, see, okay.
Every passing season.
I've seen
And I'm wondering
I saw the movie that came out a few years ago, which was mediocre at best. But then then I watched.
That movie was terrible.
It was
absolutely terrible.
But I watched. But I started watching the animated series on Netflix 5 or 6 months ago, and you're right. That first season, I only got maybe 3 or 4 episodes into it because I'm like, this is just, it's kind of corny, and it's probably geared towards an audience that's like under 10 years old or younger than that. I'm like, cool, but I was having a hard time getting through it because I'm like, the story is really cool, but it's not for me, it wasn't overtaking the level of campiness for a kid, and I was having a hard time staying with it, so I stopped watching the show. But that's good to know. I'll go back and give it a shot and that's kind of how Rebels was too. When you first start watching it, I actually watched probably 2 or 3 episodes right after it released, and I was like, eh. And so I just turned it off and it didn't come back for probably a good 6-7 months. So someone's like, no, dude, you need to watch this. It's got a really cool story, and dropped some nuggets. I'm like, okay, let me go back and take a look. And then by the time I got through the 4th or 5th episode, you start to see, because every episode just builds on the last episode. You could watch every one episode in that first season, kind of like The Mandalorian, but in itself, and you'd probably still have a good time with it. But it really does build up, and it has enough serious components. It's not just serious, it's these interactions between characters who are various ages with different backgrounds and different experience levels that you see them as a family. So you see all these different parts of like the family dynamic in all the main characters. They live on the same ship. You actually go into their rooms. Like sometimes you go in their rooms and they've got bunk beds and they're having interactions from in the room. Like when do you go into someone's bedroom in a cartoon and see, like that's not a thing. Like that's the room they exit into off camera or off, cartoon edge, and then it comes back to them later on. You don't ever go in there. So things like that happen that get you closer to the brother, sister, or father, son sort of aspect of some of these characters in the show, which makes it feel more like I started to become more emotionally attached because they are so much more like a family dynamic. You're like, okay, well, somebody who's got a family, like I can connect with all these different feelings they're each going through. Like, oh, that like made me attached to the show really, really easily. And then from there, it just got better and better and better. Every season just got progressively amazing after that.
Yeah, I've watched this show, and again, like I'm big on like I'll sample a little bit, I'll kind of see where this is going, and it seems to get like it does the thing that I think Star Wars does when it's at its best, which is it does a great level of like introduction, and then it adds depth over time. Like you can't get to Empire in Star Wars. You know what I mean? It's like you can't like just. It would have been terrible if during the trench run, Darth Vader's like, oh, you know what? This guy, he seems like he could be my son. You know what I mean? It's like you need these stories to kind of add depth over time. And from what I've seen of Rebels, that's exactly what has happened. It seems like it was very much like an adventure show at first that got over time incredibly deep and really started to live in its lore, like understood what it could do.
Towards the end of the series, I believe it was the last season of the last season, you start to get into the Emperor shows up. Like he becomes not prominent character, but he becomes a character in the show towards the end of that season, and it brings in a lot of the sort of the behind the scenes stuff of the Force. So you visit this place called the world, the I think it was the World in Between, or the World in Between Worlds. You go this place that's like in the ether of the Force, and you discover what that, and like this other piece becomes a part of it. There's these types of characters called, there's a Lothcat. So the show is prominently on a planet called Lothal, where the Empire has a big factory there, and they do a lot of stuff. It doesn't matter. They're there. There's these things called loath cats, which is like a native creature, and then these things called loath wolves, which is basically a wolf, but like a dire wolf, like it's the size of a person. But you never see them. They're like not really a part of the show, but you see artwork in various places referenced because they're like part of the mythology of the planet they're on. But there's stories of like ages ago there were loath wolves and blah blah blah. But they actually start to show up, and you realize they're actually like a force sensitive creature in the show, but not in a overt like they stand on their hind legs and they use the force. It's not that. It's much more nuanced that plays into a larger sort of like more existential version of the force that you really want to connect with. Like it's not just there's Jedi and there's Sith and they fight each other and they use space magic to fight each other. It's not that. Like I love that stuff too, but it's not that. It's more of the subtle and the things that like they happen because you believed it to be real, and now it can happen for you, and we're going to help you to the degree like that sort of stuff. That's always like you're going to get just enough help to get you where you need to go, but you're going to need to learn a lesson along the way, and you see that play out, and the characters develop, and they learn. The youngest character learns from it and grows over time. His haircut changes. Like his personality changes over time, etc. And they just do such a good job, not just blending into the other movies and setting up the other movies, but they bring in characters like Thrawn. Like he becomes a big part of the show for at least one full season, and various things like that. So it's as you get through it, it turned out to be probably next to Clone Wars, probably my top animated series, if not top like featurette or production that Star Wars has done at all, because the Clone Wars was amazing because you get to learn about the Clone Wars, but there's so much that happens in those 6 seasons, 7 seasons. There's so much that happens in there that it can kind of muddy. Like I forgot, like there's one season I think was all about bounty hunters, and I totally spaced. I don't even watch that one again because I remember going, this was not really my jam. But with Rebels, it's the same set of characters the whole way through, sometimes doing different things, but it's really following like what is happening to them and the people around them as they go through this time in their life. For me, at least, it makes it like really easy to connect with that because of that dynamic.
That's awesome. And see, that's what I think. I think Star Wars and really even the Clone Wars works its best when it's adding space for those characters to just be characters.
Yeah, I totally agree.
A thing that happens a lot, and I see this, in some of these kind of like fast produced items is they'll focus on the biggest part of the plot is the action set piece. It's like it was almost like they started with that set piece and worked backwards from there. Like, how do we get these people to an explosion? And that happens a lot too. And we talked about this in the last episode, comic book movies. And what I always thought was interesting was, and by the way, this is a thing that I think the Clone Wars really helped to explore a lot. And I am hoping that some future items could also be explored in the sequel trilogy and I like this that Rebels does this is it lives with these people that are in that space. Like it's one of the reasons why I like Rogue One.
Oh,
it
100%.
pulls back the curtain on something that I knew had to be there, but I didn't know what it was like.
Yeah.
And I just really enjoyed that. Well, and going ahead.
No, I was gonna say that. So there is a bit of like a retcon that happened. We all know about it. So like in A New Hope, when they're on the Akbar's ship and they're prepping for the run to the Death Star, and they got the Death Star plans, and Mon Mothma says many Bothans lost their lives getting us this information, and like, okay, Bothan spies. We're like, okay, we never really saw any Bothans necessarily in Rogue One. Okay, cool, but whatever. But like take that little bit of a retcon out of there, that one piece. That scene, many Bothan spies lost their lives to give us this knowledge. I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember exactly, but like it's one of those moments. Like Rogue One basically took that sentence and turned it into a movie, and I love that because you know that like a person in Mon Mothma's position in the story at that moment in time with such a dire or dour like many Bothan spies like just. We need to do this, but we all need to recognize that this cost a lot for us to get this. It's like you go back and think about it. Like, hold on. Well, if it cost a lot, what the hell was that? Like, what did you guys have to do to get this? And then you see Rogue One, and you're like, oh wow, like this is what it took. That type of sacrifice, and many sacrifices have to be made to get to something like this. That one sentence in one other movie, 30 years before. I love it.
Yeah,
I just adore that.
that's where it's like, because you look at, because Rogue One too, it borrows a lot from that opening crawl that's in Star Wars, and I absolutely love it, just like what you're saying. Again, everyone, welcome to the Kessel Chat agree forum. Jeff and I talking about how much we like a lot of the same things. I like when you can take a small thing and kind of make that much bigger. And it's funny because it's like you can rat hole in areas that don't necessarily work out the best. Like, and that happens sometimes. That happens sometimes in like the prequel trilogy. Like sometimes you'll get something where it's like they'll spend maybe a little bit too much time in something that doesn't really add to the story. But Clone Wars, from what I've seen of Rebels, from what I've seen in a lot of different areas, I always like it when they take something that actually has a little bit of like mystery and mysticism and actually kind of builds that up. Like, I don't need something explained away. I actually, it's funny because it's like I see that being done a lot too, and that happens in the prequels, like midichlorians. I didn't doubt it. I was never like, but how do they communicate with the Force? It's just, hey, they're space wizards. But it's one of these things where it's like I really enjoy things that hint at something. Like when Obi-Wan is talking to Luke and he says, I was a Jedi Knight, the same as your father. When he is talking about Anakin was a good friend. When I first knew him, he was an amazing pilot. Those lines like that are the types of things that when I was a kid, I was like, I want to see that. I want to see that story. I want to see why Owen is so worried about Luke turning out like his father, which, of course, before you watch Empire, you just think, oh, he's just going to be reckless. And it's funny because it's like, that's where, I liked Solo. I liked a lot of those movies. I know that there's people that are out there that are like, I didn't like it. And it's funny because it's like, I didn't need to know where Han Solo got his gun. But I did like spending time with those characters, even if it is a different actor that's in that role. I liked spending time with that character. It's funny how it's like sometimes a movie or a property will spend time adding background where it's like, well, I didn't have that question. But you know what I did have? I wanted to know what kind of brought the motivations of this character. Like show me that. Show me the relationship that Anakin and Obi-Wan must have for Obi-Wan to feel so conflicted, even after watching that hollow security camera in episode 3. Like expand that part of the universe. Yeah. And it seems like Rebels has really done that.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because it's when I think what people miss a lot of times in productions like a movie, a TV show, what have you, is that thing you're describing. You see the conflict in Obi-Wan and dealing with Vader or Anakin, and when he mentions him a couple of times, you can tell that he's just, Alec Guinness did just such an amazing job portraying that sort of like the same, and Ewan McGregor and others later on, the beard thing, and like portraying that level of like he is clearly in deep contemplation. And when you sit back and you think about it for a minute, you're like, what? It's never what leads a character to that point is never something like, well, we were good friends, then one day he's like, dude, I'm a Darksider now, and we fought a little bit, and then that was it. Like, that's not how that works. It's never. We know that with our own human relationships and friendships. Like, when something falls apart, it's not because of that one thing that happened at the end that was was like the straw that broke the camel's back. It was a series of things over a long period of time that led to this point for you to go, yeah, we need to end this right now, or it's now officially ending, whatever that thing is. So going back and watching it in some way in other series, whether it's Rebels or, pick another series that exists in, seeing that build up. The Clone Wars was a great example of that for their two characters. Seeing that build up of, he's the little kid trained by, Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon dies, becomes this, and as they go through, that like Obi-Wan and him have a contentious relationship because Obi-Wan wasn't really ready to be a master. He's doing this because, Qui-Gon, he wanted to do this for Qui-Gon, but for years it was, I'm doing this for Qui-Gon, before it finally became, oh crap, I should be really helping this kid. And that all these things have to happen. By the time we see him in the Clone Wars, Anakin went from little tiny kid to late age teenager. Like there's a huge amount of time there and at things that had to have happened between the two of them. And Obi-Wan was a kid. He was a young Jedi Knight when he first took on Anakin. So like he was young and immature and still growing up. And like all of that stuff between two people together, it has to lead to where, and then of course, then you introduce the Clone Wars and all the crap that happened over X number of years through that period of time. Like, and then you kind of now go back and watch A New Hope and see Obi-Wan react, and you're like, oh, that makes a lot more sense now. Like they've been through some shit. Like, pardon my French, but like they've been through some stuff, man. Like this was not like we cool one day and we're not. This was there's some baggage back there for sure.
Yeah, and that was always a thing that and it's funny because it's like this actually kind of tees up another topic that I think that I know we're going to be covering here, which is I haven't had a chance to spend that much time with Rebels. And, speaking of Clone Wars, there's, of course, the original Clone Wars series that, if I'm right, in our last call, you were talking about you hadn't spent as much time with that series. And that covers a lot of that Anakin Obi-Wan background.
Yes, I've Genndy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars series. And I don't remember when that first aired, but it had to have been the mid-2000s. Because I think it was in my first major company that I was working for in my career, and that's where I first learned about it. And it already, when the person at work told me about it, it had already been out for some period of time. That's getting released. I believe it's on April 2nd. That is coming to Disney Plus, so it will be there. And then I think it had 2 volumes, like 2 seasons, I guess. So that they will both be there alongside our favorite. It made me laugh to even see this. The 2 different Ewok series back from when we were kids. Those are also coming to Disney Plus. I'm like, this is just awesome. Like this is. I'm gonna stop everything and watch those.
An online petition to get that on Disney Plus. I mean, thank God. It's funny because it's like the stuff that Disney Plus is selecting sometimes is like boggling my mind. Because in my mind, that Clone Wars series is one of the first times that I got like super. In fact, I started watching Samurai Jack because of that series. Which of course, Samurai Jack. Anybody who's out there knows it's amazing. It is one of the best animated series that came out in the early 2000s. But yeah, it was this series that came out. It was in the lull between 2002, when episode 2 came out, and 2003. And I think what had happened is George Lucas, and this is, I think, this is kind of an extension of the planning of episodes 1, 2, and 3. Episode 1, he really wanted to go back and show this like young Anakin character, this young Obi-Wan character, sped it up 10 years. Now we're in episode 2. We've got both of them older. We've got Padme older. We've got the universe in a huge change. And then there was a recognition that there was going to be a gap, that next jump was going to skip over this thing that we knew that was there, which was the Clone Wars. And they had to give that time. And so the first season, and I could be totally wrong, and someone out there can 100% correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just going to take some guesses. The first season, I think it was only going to be 1 season.
Oh, okay.
And it was
I didn't know
so
that.
well received that they expanded it and they did the second season. Because the first season is these like, I'll use a very classy term, little vignettes. They're very short, like 2-minute stories. One part of the story is serialized, which is Anakin and Obi-Wan's story as they're kind of liberating a planet, while also they are engaging with Anakin's engaging with, I think it's Ventress, and there's this bounty hunter stuff in there, and this is also the origin of the fleet of IG-88 bounty hunters. There are in fact several, 100 IG-88 bounty hunters, and if I'm right, the bounty hunter's name is like Dirge or something like that. And it's this really, and he's got like I used to think it was like a bantha skull, but I guess it's some other type of skull that the bounty hunters use as a logo. And that series is great. And then you get all these little vignettes, like you get the Mace Windu vignette, you get a Yoda vignette and a Padme vignette, and they're all very, very nice. You go to like Ilum and you see all the lightsaber crystals. It's really cool. But the second season, man, So we have a friend, Matt Saunders, and when we were talking about this on Twitter, Matt tweeted out. He said, "Season 2 is epic," and Matt is correct. It is an accurate use of that term. People throw that around all the time. Season 2 is like, for real, one of the best Star Wars stories that I've seen. It's like got a full character arc. It's also got a nice call out for anybody who grew up in the 80s is going to know Nelvana Animation. They go to this planet like where it's this people are the Nelvon warriors. It is the story that's happening. There's a heist story that's happening on the planet that leads right to the start of episode 3. And then there is a really personal story that's happening between Anakin and Obi-Wan. And oh my gosh, it is.
You're talking about that heist story. You're talking about what literally leads up to the very beginning of episode 3.
Runs right up to episode 3.
Okay, and you know what? Yes, thank you, because I remember it. I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't watched it, but I have seen that episode, and that's where you learn a lot about. Well, I would say a lot about Grievous. You probably have already learned, I don't know, probably already learned some amount about Grievous already in the series. But in that series, there's a very core piece of Grievous that you see in episode 3 that doesn't make a lot of sense because you're like, is this just how he is? And you learn exactly how he became that literally right before. Like when you see him on the ship at the very beginning of Revenge of the Sith in the movie, he's behaving a particular way, and you learn in that series exactly why that like just happened. Like had literally just before, like probably minutes or an hour or two beforehand had just happened to him.
Oh no, it is, and it is awesome, and it also like adds into that background where Mace Windu's like, General Grievous, he's gonna run and hide like he always does. Again, like he always does. Well, we now get a little bit of that background, like he always does. But one of the things that's okay, I'll just call out 2 things that I love about this. That if you've not watched this, set your calendars, like be ready on April 2nd to watch this. So my one thing that I love is the 2 Jedi that are involved in the heist part of the story. 2 of the Jedi are aliens that are inside of the Star Wars cantina, and the cantina scene in Star Wars.
Oh, okay.
And they're great because they really reuse the sounds of those 2 aliens talking. It is great to see because actually, if I'm right, there's a 3rd Jedi that's also at the start of that story that's also from the cantina scene, the one that kind of looks like a werewolf. So those are great. It's great to see that callback. It's I can't remember what the alien's name is, like Lithorian or something. And he's got 4 throats. It's like it is a great.
It has the big flat shaped head. Yeah, it's an Ithorian. Yeah, yes, they usually have like a thing on their mouth, so when their vents move, you can actually hear what they're saying, like in a vocalized way. Yeah.
His voice kind of sounds like he's a coffee grinder.
Yes.
He looks like a coffee grinder. He looks like a coffee grinder. So that whole sequence, amazing. The second part with Anakin and Obi-Wan, again, it is one of my favorites. It is in Empire Strikes Back. Luke is on Dagobah, and he suddenly feels cold. He says, "I feel cold, death." And Yoda says, "That cave over there, that place, it's strong on the dark side of the Force, and in you must go." And he's like, "What's in there?" And it's like, "Only what you take with you." And by the way, that's like a pretty BA line. And so then Anakin has a similar moment, and both Anakin and Luke deal with that differently. Mm-hmm. And whereas Luke has a mentor that says, "Remember your failure in the cave," like to remind him of what happens when he kind of makes wrong choices. Anakin doesn't share what happens to him. And so there's no one there to tell him, "Remember that was your failure in the cave." And so his mentor, who's there with him, isn't able to give him that advice. It adds so much more dimension to Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship. Again, you haven't seen it. If you've only heard about it, if you've only had to watch like grainy footage of this on YouTube, please, anybody that's watching, I 100% recommend it. It is one of my favorite interpretations of Star Wars.
Dude, that is awesome. I am super excited. So it's already noted on my calendar. I'll be watching it as soon as it comes out, and then shortly thereafter I'll watch the Ewoks with my son, and I'm just really curious to see how well that's going to hold up. I hardly remember it, but I'm like, you know what? I'm down. It's going to be a fun. It's gonna be fun. Well, listen, dude, we've got a few other things to get through before we wrap it up for tonight. I know you had a couple of the notes here, but I wanted to get to some of the books that are coming out here soon, because I put a few on here, and I got a couple links out there that I'll post in the show notes when we're done tonight. After this video is up and active for everybody, I'll get some stuff in the description so you can see some more details. But there's a lot of books coming out, and I didn't create a little overlay to show you all, but I will have that posted. I don't know if you've taken a look at, but some news that just came out is, before I get to that news, over the next few months, it's like about every 3 weeks, give or take, a new High Republic book drops. I mean, there are a lot of other Star Wars books that are dropping regularly, but this comes back around to something, a series you mentioned last time that you really love, Dr. Aphra. I'll get back to her in just a minute. So the New Republic stuff is coming out like every 3 weeks. There's the High Republic and the High Republic Adventures. Those are actively releasing. I think the next actual printed books that come out don't come out until like the end of May, beginning of June, which is perfect because there's plenty of time to kind of build up between the two. There's another series of the latest book, it's up here on my shelf, kind of hard to see right here, called Victory's Pride. It's part of the Alphabet Squadron trilogy. That just came out, I think, last month. So there's all 3 books now in that trilogy are out. It follows post-Empire falling apart, post-Operation Cinder. If you've seen the Battlefield, what was the name of that Battlefield, not Shadow Squadron, there was Battlefront, the game where they did one where it was like this small squadron of like 3 Imperials that like kind of go through things, and then they change over time. In that, you learn about this thing called Operation Cinder, which is really only talked about in that game, but then is mentioned in future properties after the game, where Operation Cinder was Palpatine's like final last ditch. And what you learn in that game or in one of the other books is that Palpatine did this, where it was this basically, if I can't have it, nobody can have it. And this final plan that like all these planets throughout the entire galaxy simultaneously, when Cinder was enacted, started getting aerial bombardments with like essentially massive tactical nuclear weapons and killing everybody on the entire planet across the entire galaxy all at the exact same time. And later on, in one of the other books, it is mentioned that the reason he does Operation Cinder, in his words, is because if an empire fails its emperor and lets its emperor die, the empire, what could an empire be without an emperor? And if you let your emperor die, there's no reason for you to be here anymore. And you should basically be punished because you couldn't keep your own emperor alive. And so he enacts Operation Cinder. And in the game, you see like one of the commanders, his daughter is there, and she's like, "You need to come with me. You can't stay here." He goes, "I can't. I got to do this." And he's like, "I'm not saying it's right, but this is who I am, and I got to be me, and you got to be you. So you need to go, and I'm going to stand here on the bridge of my ship while my ship crashes, watching this thing happen." And it's like, what? It's just such a dark moment where it becomes the Empire, and more importantly, the Emperor becomes so much more evil and dark than you ever thought they could be before. Like, yeah. And so Alphabet Squadron, the series, takes place sometime after that, where a lot of Imperials have like defected to the Rebels or the New Republic, and this small squadron is put together of 5 fighter pilots to basically go after a special TIE fighter wing called Shadow Wing that is just decimating people everywhere. And it's a really interesting, just human thing, or a personal thing, because the story really centers around these 5 different pilots. 3 of them are human. 2 are alien, non-human basically, but they all fly a different plane. So there's a B-wing, an A-wing, an X-wing, a TIE fighter. Like they all have something different. They all and a U-wing. They all fly something different. They all have to learn how to coordinate together, but they all got their own baggage they come with, and they interact with situations differently. They don't necessarily want to be friends. They don't necessarily want to work together. Oh, and by the way, Hera Syndulla is like the commander of the ship that they're on. So Hera from, if you don't know, she from Star Wars Rebels. She's like the main character, one of the main characters. She is a very prominent character in all the books, like very prominent character. So you get to hear more about her after she's not in the Rebels anymore. She's now a general leading part of the army of the New Republic, and you get to see the things, the maternal instinct and the leadership skills and the character dynamic she had before in this series as well. And sort of really play a mentor to a couple people, and it's really, if you haven't read them, they're fascinating. I'm struggling a little bit to get through the second book because there's kind of that mid-book lull that I'm hitting where it's just a lot of people talky for a while, and I have a hard time sometimes reading through that. But it's on my nightstand. I'm gonna finish it because I want to get to the last book here soon. But that's a whole tangent. So got the comic books. Those books just came out. All kinds of other properties. But the really cool one I wanted to bring up, and this was just announced. I'll post the link in the description. They are doing so. They announced this thing called War of the Bounty Hunters recently, and it's a new comic book series that's being released here in a couple of months. I think it's maybe in May or June. And the idea of the comic book series is it is going to explore the time from when Boba Fett picked or got Han Solo from Jabba, put him in carbonite, and not from Jabba, sorry, from Vader on Bespin, gets him, puts him in carbonite, and has to take him to Jabba. The idea is, what happened? He didn't there's no way that this person who had a massive bounty on his head, like every other bounty hunter is like, cool, I guess Boba Fett got him, so I'm just gonna, I'm good, man. No, other bounty hunters still want after this bounty because that's a crap load of money. So what happens between when he gets in Slave One and takes off from Bespin and gets to Jabba and gives him Han? What happens in that time period? So War of the Bounty Hunters is basically all the crap that Boba Fett's got to go through to get him to Jabba, which is in part leading up to the new series that Boba Fett is getting with Fennec Shand later on this year, early next year sometime, because Boba Fett's getting his own show on Disney Plus. Ming-Na Wen is going to play Fennec Shand again in that, just like she'll voice the same character in the Bad Batch, which is coming out here pretty soon. So she's gonna voice Fennec Shand in the Bad Batch animated series that's coming out here soon too. So it's like all these cross things. But the ones I posted here they're doing a run up of basically a series of tie-in stories. So there's going to be Star Wars 14 that will tie in on June 6th. They'll have a tie-in to the War of the Bounty Hunters. Dr. Aphra number 11 will tie in. That comes out on June 30th. Bounty Hunters 13 will have a tie-in, and then Darth Vader 13. So each of those 4 books on their different dates will have that issue will be a direct tie-in to the War of the Bounty Hunters series that Boba Fett's already dealing with. So there's a little tie-in piece that's going to happen along the way too. So it'll be his series run plus all of these that will touch on it too.
Oh, that's awesome. Like, and this is the kind of stuff that I like. And that's, again, it's like, I know that this has been explored a little bit. Like, I'm hoping maybe Dash Rendar might pop up from Shadows of the Empire.
Oh, dude, yes. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's cool if that doesn't happen. Like, I'm not so crazy about canon that, I understand there's a lot of, like, legends now and, like, how things work. So I'm cool. But it is one of these things where it's like, that is a cool story to explore. Like, I dig the whole background that's happening right now in the Darth Vader comic series. I like the time that's being spent with this character because he's not just some crazy guy with like a big mask and a cape. He's got motivations. He hates the Emperor as much as he feels like he has to serve him. He feels conflicted about Luke. He feels all of this conflict, which of course resonates from the movies where you have Luke say, I know that you're conflicted. I can feel it. And even though I would say he's not as conflicted in the comic books at times, but it is a great story to be able to tell. I'm excited. I hope because this sounds like it's going to be a great crossover event, and those are always hard to pull off. Sometimes crossovers, they work really, really well. Sometimes they struggle a little bit because it's obviously a lot of different writers, a lot of different illustrators. But I've got my fingers crossed. I think that this is going to be really good fit.
I'm excited, dude. It's gonna be a lot of fun, and for me coming into this these Star Wars properties at this time, like with renewed vigor, especially in the comic books, what I'm most excited about is this is my first opportunity to be a part of like the beginning phases of like, okay, we've got these new books and we got some crossovers and we get these, like, you've been through it probably a lot more than I have in my my comic book history because I didn't follow anyone. The only one I ever followed very long at all was in high school. I followed Image Comics, like right when it first became a thing. But I didn't follow it long enough to really see a lot of crossover things happen to really understand the significance of that. So I'm excited to see how that plays out for like me and from my perspective as somebody who's like not been around a lot of this for a long, long time, which I think is going to be awesome and kind of hopefully for me gives me that experience that you and I can talk about where, you're coming from I've been around this for a long time. I've seen these things play out, and I'm like, hey, I'm kind of feeling like what a lot of new people who've never been through this piece before kind of feel, and we can kind of compare and contrast like how that views from different perspectives, which is really cool.
Yeah, and what is really cool too is that sometimes, and this is when it works out in its best form, in my opinion, from a comic book fan. is when a crossover event happens, it can kind of do a nice thing of resetting some kind of current continuity. And I don't mean that from like the whole like length of things, but I mean it when you have certain crossover events, it kind of then sets the stage for a new storyline, which often then also leads to another crossover event. But one of the things, like if for those people out there that followed X-Men, for example, you had a lot of different crossover events that have happened in the last couple of years. You go back to a really big one, which was like Avengers versus X-Men, which was like a huge crossover event. And that was, kind of reset a bunch of continuity. But what it did do really well for X-Men was it set the stage for Battle of the Atom, which is one of my favorite comic book series. I think I talked about this before, but it is one of those things where it's like, I'm hoping that can happen here. What's great is that you're able, in crossover events, when done right, you bring a lot of really great stories and books together and then disperse them with all of that shared history. Yeah. It's like when, and you see that done really well, for example, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where you have a lot of, which again, it's funny how those movies are very much operating like comic books, where you have individual storylines, they converge, they then have a shared experience, and then that resets for brand new storylines and kind of an up-leveled continuity.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is one of my favorites, and hopefully, and it sounds like it's going to work great. What is a problem is when it's overly complex, when it's like a hat on a hat on a hat. It's like, oh, this is like too many things going on here. I can't really follow it. This seems like it's going to be very light.
I agree. I like that it's just I like that there's the one series that this is the new thing. War of the Bounty Hunters leads up to his own show. Cool. Oh, and hey, we're going to have literally just 4 books that will be quick offshoots just to do quick crossovers with these other kind of popular fun characters for one issue, and that's it. And like, hey, you know what? Cool. That you have a path that's leading to a new property in Boba Fett's show. Great. You have that. He's getting his own thing building up. Oh, we'll give you a little bit of touch of extra backstory that like all of these things that happen touch everything. In some way, they touch other people, and he meets people at a space station. They encounter him. There's a story of that person and what they're doing, etc. And I think that's going to be really interesting. So long as they keep it limited like that, I think it'll have an interesting effect, not just on Boba Fett and his pathway to his own properties, but also to get people excited, like, wait, who's Dr. Aphra? Or, who are these other people that are showing up? Dirge, whatever else, because that name's been thrown around a ton lately.
And I gotta say, like, this is I'm often usually really skeptical when I see number ones on comic books, or when I see, because you always get a lot of number ones that will come out, and when you see like really low numbers, because it's like, ooh, let's see if that story can mature and if it's going well. From what I've read in these comic books, these are some of my favorite comic books that have been coming out. They are really smartly done. They have some really great storylines. I feel like this is borrowing the best from what Star Wars comics once were, before Disney purchased Star Wars, and what Marvel has been doing, or at least what Marvel's been doing well. So I'm hopeful, especially this Vader comic. Like, if anybody's out there and they're like, I don't really know if I want to get into this, it's like, just as someone who took this advice, start with Vader 1. My kids actually picked up Vader 1, my oldest, and she's 13. She really enjoyed it. There is something about these stories that it's just, they've got it right. They've got the characterization right.
Yep.
The artwork is unreal. It is enthralling. It's easy to follow. If you like a good read and you're kind of like looking for some, what you would get off of a shelf, and what you would get from like a true paperback, I feel like they've got these stories down.
I think you just volunteered our big topic for next week. It's all about Vader. It's all about the Vaders. All about the Vaders. Well, listen, we're at time. We ran a little bit long tonight, so thanks everyone for sticking with us. We really appreciate it. Ryan, where can everyone find you on the interwebs?
Oh, you can find me at Ryan Rose, and again, I tweet about a lot of things. When I'm not tweeting about technology, I love to talk about Star Wars, of course, again Star Trek, anything that's coming out that's brand new, comic books all the time. I love comic books, so I'm happy to talk about that. But yeah, find me on Twitter at Ryan Rose.
Right on, dude. And you can find me at Jeff Bull Tech, and you can also find the Kessel Chat account on Instagram and on Twitter, both at the Kessel Chat. We're getting more. I'm trying to get more of that ramped up so it's out there more frequently. And then before we go, like and subscribe. I'm always going to say that. Hit the big subscribe button. Hit the like button, because hitting the like button does help the algorithm, so we get more views and more eyeballs on the show, which is awesome. And if you want to get notified when new stuff comes out, hit the little bell icon. And don't forget, March 25th, giving this thing away. So join the show. Watch it. Find out how we're going to raffle this thing off. And thank you, everyone, for joining. We appreciate it. Ryan, it's awesome to have you here, buddy.
Hey, Jeff, thank you so much. I love this. I could have gone on for another hour, 2 hours. No joke. Thank you, everybody, too, for joining. But yeah, Jeff, thanks for the invitation. I loved it. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Bye, everybody.